Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiriritam Kalmashapaham Sravanamangalam Srimadaatatam Bhuvi Grananti Ye Bhurida Jana. So the master with the Brahma devotees. So a Brahma devotee, sir, do you believe in the reincarnation of the soul? Master, yes, they say there is something like that. How can we understand the ways of God through our small intellects? Many people have spoken about reincarnation. Therefore, I cannot disbelieve it. As Bhishma lay dying on his bed of arrows, the Pandava brothers and Krishna stood around him. They saw tears flowing from the eyes of the great hero. Arjuna said to Krishna, "Friend, how surprising it is! Even such a man as our grandsire Bhishma, truthful, self-restrained, supremely wise, and one of the 8 Vasus, weeps through Maya at the hour of death." Sri Krishna asked Bhishma about it. Bhishma replied, "O Krishna, you know very well that this is not the cause of my grief. I am thinking that there is no end to the Pandavas' sufferings. The God himself is their charioteer." Krishna, an incarnation of God, was Arjuna's charioteer. A thought like this makes me feel that I have understood nothing of the ways of God, and so I weep. So here we find apparently as if the question which was asked, do you believe in reincarnation of the soul? And first master is saying, Sri Ramakrishna is saying that I have heard that there is something like that, and who can understand the ways of God through our small intellects. But many have spoken about reincarnation as if he's not directly ascribing to the fact that there is something called reincarnation. I have heard of it, and what can I understand with our small intellects? That's also important, because we as such with our intellect can never perceive something which is called reincarnation. That we have read in the scriptures. We may have heard from someone who may have had near-death experience, but something that after death the soul is leaving the body. Have anyone seen? No one seen. So with our intellect, with our present state of mind, we can never understand that whether there is reincarnation or not. So what Sri Ramakrishna is answering is wonderful. He's saying that with our intellect we don't understand. But at the same time he's saying I have heard of it. But the next thing what he's saying as if it is out of context. That the Pandavas went to Bhishma and he saw he was crying, and the Pandavas asked Krishna that even Bhishma at the time of death is crying just like an ordinary human being. How profound is the play of Maya? And then Krishna asks the Pandavas to ask him that why he is crying. And when Bhishma was asked that why he is crying, his reply was that just seeing the God's divine play, the God himself is with the Pandavas, and still they have to go through so much of afflictions. Seeing that, I have a feeling that I have understood nothing of the God's ways, and that's why I'm crying. Now you may feel that as if Sri Ramakrishna deviated from the topic, that it was asked that whether he believes in reincarnation of the soul or not, but what he's answering has nothing to do with that question. But that's why we have to be very, very, that when we are reading the gospel, we have to read between the lines. Actually, he's giving a wonderful answer. Wonderful answer. What he's saying is something interesting. That Arjuna is with the God and still they are going through all those afflictions. What actually is speaking of? That we do not know that how the omniscient and the omnipotent conscious principle, which is the Lord, he has got entangled in ignorance and goes through the cycles of innumerable births and deaths. We can never answer that question. As Swami Vivekananda in his lecture, in the paper of Hinduism, he mentions a wonderful thing, that what is ignorance? That the perfect somehow is appearing as imperfect. It is a God who has become the universe. It is a God who is appearing as these jivas, these embodied beings. It is in the core of each and every being. It is the God and God alone who is appearing as the being. How it has happened, we don't know. There is a way out. But as long as we are in that ignorance, the God who is the essence of our being, who is always with us, but as we are in ignorance, we don't realize that God is with us. We get identified with the body-mind complex, and we go through so many afflictions, life after life. So what's the idea? That it is not only with Arjuna, it is not only with Pandavas during the Mahabharata war that God was with them. God is actually with all of us for life after life. But as we don't realize Him, though God is with us, we are going through so many of afflictions. So that's the thing Bhishma is actually indicating. That it is the Pandavas with whom God is there, still they are going through so much of afflictions. I don't understand the way of God. By that he is indicating that God is in the heart of each and every being. But because of ignorance, as the individuals don't realize that the divinity is within them, it is the core of their being, they feel they are afflicted. And they go through this cycle of birth and death for lives together, suffering so much of afflictions. And that's what is the way of Maya. That's what we cannot answer. We do not know. That is ignorance. That is Maya. That why the perfect is appearing as imperfect. You may say, how we know the perfect has become imperfect? It is impossible to know. But there is a way out. We know through spiritual practice that we can go beyond this idea of this limited body-mind complex to realize that I am that omniscient, omnipotent being in essence. I can go to that realization. And when I go to that realization, then I realize somehow I was in Maya. Just like when you are dreaming, you don't know that you are dreaming. Only when you come out of the dream, you know I was dreaming. Why I was dreaming, when my dream started, what's the cause of the dream, I can never answer. That's all ignorance. But there is a way out. I can come out of the dream and then I realize I was dreaming. And when I was dreaming, the one who is perfect, the one who is with God eternally, felt he is alienated from the divine. And he is going through all these tribulations, trials and tribulations of life. So the idea, though Sri Ramakrishna appears to have deviated from his answer, but what a wonderful answer he is giving. He is actually ascribing to the fact that we do go through the process of birth and death. And as we are in ignorance, when we are going through this process of birth and death, though in essence we are the divine, we forget the divinity and we feel we are going through these afflictions of life. And that's what is Maya and that's what is ignorance. So now you can try to relate the words of Ramakrishna with the allegory which he is giving. So first he starts what? Yes, they say there is something like that. Why he is answering that way? That even God, when God incarnates and if he says, I am the incarnation of God, who will believe? He looks like a human being. So to assert that what I am saying is correct, that can never in any way help us to get rid of the doubts, because we won't believe that he is a incarnation of God, even if God incarnates and say. So their answers are like something in third person. Knowing very well the proper answer of it, he is never giving the answer directly. Yes, there is something like that. How can we understand the ways of God? And next thing is that you may say, but we don't realize in our life we have never perceived the soul coming out of the body and getting embodied in another body. We don't see it. So why should we believe? So to answer that question, he's just putting another questions. That how can we understand the ways of God through small intellects? Is the entire creation, whatever is happening, can be understood by our intellects? Is our intellect the ultimate criteria to understand the ways of the life? There are so many things beyond our intellect. Even in science, we know that with intellect, we cannot understand anything. Whatever we have discovered at present, even as per the physical world is concerned, is just infinitesimal compared to the hidden mysteries of the universe. What to speak of God? So with a small intellect, so many things we cannot perceive. That it doesn't mean that what I cannot perceive doesn't exist. There are so many things beyond my intellect. So to get rid of that idea, that narrow-mindedness, that whatever I don't see, whatever I don't understand doesn't exist. To get rid of that, what is saying? How can we understand the ways of God through a small intellect? Many people have spoken about reincarnation. There are, just like as it happens in science, that those who have followed the scientific way of understanding, they speak of some truth. They are authentic person. I don't, with my limited intellect, understand all those theories. But I, taking them to be the authentic person of the science, I believe in them. So here also Sri Ramakrishna is saying the same thing, that many people, many realized souls who have went through the path of spiritual illumination, as we were indicating, in the process of spiritual illumination, the moment we are about to go to that highest rung of spiritual realization, before that, when the mind gets purified, the past births becomes vivid. It becomes vivid. When this idea that I am this body-mind complex has fallen off, your bias linked with this body-mind complex has fallen off, you start regressing to the past. And you see how many lives we have wasted just by thinking that all the small worldly ambitions is the be-all and end-all of our life. We were myopic. We never knew what's waiting for us. Just a little ahead. And then we found that whatever nature gave us, they started taking away from me. And the life came to an end. And whatever all the worldly things which I have gained, nothing I could take with me. And then I felt this is a waste. But again I took birth. Again I forgot. I was processing this. I was just going through this process again and again, again and again. But those the one who has freed his mind from all his this limited adjuncts, that he is this limited body-mind complex through spiritual illumination, goes to that pure ego, pure identification of ego, that which ego is established in asmita, not in mamatva. Just I am, not mine. Whatever you think is mine, my thoughts, my opinion, my bias, my body-mind complex, all those mamatva has fallen off. Just amness, asmita, pure asmita. With that, you exist. It happens before you have a jump to that ultimate realization. That's the state when you regress to the past and see that how we have wasted our lives. And then comes para vairagya, supreme renunciation. That why to go through this process of wastage of time, this process of birth and death which serves no purpose. And then that supreme renunciation comes. That takes us even beyond the mind to that ultimate realization. And when they come back out of unconditional love to teach humankind in the way of the spiritual evolution, in the way of spiritual uh, illumination, they have spoken about reincarnation. They are authentic person. They are speaking from their realization. How can I disbelieve? Just the way in science, so many things I don't know. But the moment I consider this person as an authentic person, that the scientist, they have went through this research, which I don't understand. I just simply believe them. So here also, Ramakrishna is saying the same thing, that those illumined souls who have spoken about it, how can I disbelieve them? And then the interesting thing he's saying, but this reincarnation is really a big wonder. Why? That the soul who is ever perfect, the moment he comes under the spell of Maya and thinks himself as the embodied being, the core of his being is still the divine. But he is always the so-called Jiva, this embodied being, is in association with the divine. But because of the ignorance, he goes through lives after life, through all these trials and tribulations, dissatisfactions, unfulfillments. So God is always with him. He's not supposed to go through all those trials. The God who is ever fulfilled. That's what is my real nature. Why should I go through all those? And that's the Maya, that's the ignorance. It's just like a dream. When we wake up from the dream, I find nothing has changed. I am the same person as I was before the dream. And the same person, nothing has changed. So it's the same divine, remains the same divine. Somehow the dream came in between. And though I was with me only, I haven't went anywhere. It was just simply dreaming. But in the dream I thought I am dissociated from myself. I got identified with the happenings of life. And I was going through all those miseries. So I was never alienated from the divine. The divine was still the essence of my being. It is with me. But still I was feeling that it is me who is being affected by all the happenings of life. Nothing was really affecting me, but I felt that way and I was going through this suffering. And that is the thing, in the form of allegory, Sri Ramakrishna is indicating to that incidence. That Bhishma was crying, unable to decipher the Maya, the divine play of the Lord. How? That Arjuna and the other Pandavas, with whom God is always there. Still they are going through the tribulations. The idea is the same as that all the beings are like those Pandavas. They are always in association with the divine. But still they are going through these afflictions. And that is Maya. That is the divine play. That is the play of the ignorance. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. How wonderfully, without giving a direct answer. That's why we say, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, that you have to reflect a lot. After hearing, you did a lot of manana. Otherwise, sometimes some of the answers appears to be incoherent, but they're not incoherent. He's speaking from the depth of his realization, some wonderful truth. So, though God is always with us, but because of ignorance, we get associated with this psychophysical existence, with all my body-mind complex and its association with the world. This mamatva develops, that this is mine, and I get identified with it. And with that identification, we go through lives after lives through this process of reincarnation and suffering the afflictions in the form of this pancha klesha, avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, virivesha, attachment, hatred, fear. We go through all this life after life, and that's the divine Maya. So that's how Sri Ramakrishna indirectly is saying that yes, there is, of course, the reincarnation of soul. But why it happens, that's something we never understand. That's the ignorance. And that's the lila. That's the divine play. So Swami Vivekananda also give the same answer. So it was as we were saying, that in the paper of Hinduism, Swami Vivekananda is also indicating the same thing. That how the perfect became imperfect, we don't know, and that is ignorance. We give a very bold answer, we don't know. But we are not bothered about it. There is a way out. So we are more interested in the way out, to come out of this process. So there is a way out. A realized soul whose ignorance has fallen off realizes that the soul was never bound. The cycles of births and deaths and the suffering that entailed from it, They were all Maya. Why the soul goes through this dream can never be answered. And that is why it is described as the God's Leela. That's what Vishma is saying. It is God's divine play. It is His Leela. So it was about 8:30 when the evening worship began in the prayer hall. Soon the moon rose in the autumn sky and flooded the trees and creepers of the garden with its light. After prayer, the devotees began to sing. Sri Ramakrishna was dancing, intoxicated with the love of God. The Brahmo devotees danced around him to the accompaniment of drums and cymbals. All appeared to be in a very joyous mood. The place echoed and re-echoed with God's holy name. When the music had stopped, Sri Ramakrishna prostrated himself on the ground and, making salutations to the Divine Mother, again and again said, Bhagavat Bhakta Bhagavan. My salutations at the feet of the Jnanis, my salutations at the feet of the Bhaktas. I salute the Bhaktas who believe in God with form, and I salute the Bhaktas who believe in God without form. I salute the knowers of Brahman of olden times, and my salutations at the feet of the modern knowers of Brahman of the Brahma Samaj. So that's how Sri Ramakrishna is acknowledging that Jato Mat Tato Path, that all the paths lead to that ultimate goal. As many paths, so many ways to God. So that's why he is saying that my salutation to the Bhaktas, the devotees, to the Jnanis, means those who believe in God with form, there's the devotees. Those who believe in God without form, to them also he is saying his Bhaktas. I salute the Bhaktas who believe in God without form. Why they are Bhakta? Because whatever, whether you believe in God with form or you believe in that ultimate reality which is formless, which is the essence of the entire universe, for realization you have to have bhakti. That's when you are contemplating, either you are contemplating a God or you are contemplating on the idea Aham Brahmasmi. This contemplation is not just a mere matter of will, that I sit down with a resolution. That will has to get converted into devotion. How? By constant practice. What I do with resolution today, it creates a path in my mind. And once the path is created, I start liking to do it. It becomes my obsession. And that speaks of the devotion. That once your emotion gets linked with your practice, that's devotion. It has to happen whether you believe in God with form or you believe in God without form. It has to happen. The devotion has to be there. And then only their meditation can be effective. It enters into a state of flow which can take you to that ultimate realization, the tremendous focus which is required to take you beyond the idea of this limited individuality by the falling off of the ego. Whatever path we may follow needs tremendous devotion. The devotion gives that focus, and that focus enables us to go beyond the bindings of this body-mind complex and ultimately of the ego to take us to that realization. So that's why they are also bhaktas. The so-called Jnanis are also bhaktas because they also have to do something with the devotion, with that emotional faculty which has developed through the constant practice which started with a resolution that has to get converted into. So that's why all are bhaktas. So bhaktas who believe in God with form, I salute to the bhaktas who believe in God without form. I salute the knowers of Brahman of olden times, that ultimate those who go to that realization, and my salutations to the modern Brahmo Samaj devotees. They are also the so-called worshippers of Brahman, but they believe in the Brahman who is with attributes but without form. It is like the other Abrahamic religions' idea of divinity. So that's the idea of the Brahman, idea of Brahman as per the adherents of the Brahmo Samaj is concerned. So he's saying, by any of this path, you can go to that goal. So my salutations to all. But he started with Bhagavat Bhakta Bhagavan, that's the word. What he's speaking of? That Bhagavat is the scripture that depicts the divine play of the divine incarnations. if you go through the Bhagavat, the entire Bhagavat, that it depicts that how many times God have incarnated and He enacted just like a human being. And His enactment as a human being in various forms is to enable the ordinary bound soul to get devoted to Him and contemplating on His life. By associating with His life, they gradually start rising up in love, in devotion, to ultimately realize the absolute. So Bhagavat is the scripture that depicts the Leela, the divine play of the divine incarnations, holding on to which a bhakta attains Bhagavan, the divine. So these three, this Bhagavat, Bhakta, Bhagavan, this ultimately collapses into one. So that's why I used to say Bhagavat, Bhakta, Bhagavan. These three are one in three, three in one. It's a triad which at last collapses. You hold on to the Bhagavatam, a Bhakta holds on to the Bhagavatam, and with his association with the Bhagavan, gradually he proceeds in his spiritual journey to attain the divine. So these three are one in three and three in one. So as in the words of Ramakrishna, Leela dhore dhore nitya pochano. You hold on to the God comes down and performs his Leela. He comes down so that holding on to his Leela, we can move up. So that's the idea which is being depicted by this pronunciation, Bhagavat, Bhakta, Bhagavan. There are innumerable avatars. Even in the Bhagavatam it is mentioned, avatarahi asankhaya. So many times divine has incarnated. They are innumerable. And thereby God's Leela is also innumerable. A devotee, as per his temperament and likings, resorts to the contemplation of any one of those divine incarnations. There are so many incarnations. As per our inclinations, as per our temperament, we can choose any one of them as our Ishta. And then we can proceed in our journey and attain the divine. So Sri Ramakrishna is saluting all of them. In whatever form you may think of that absolute, God has incarnated in so many ways. He expresses himself, manifests himself in so many varied forms. Whatever appeals to us, we can hold on to that, and with that we can realize the ultimate. That's why Sri Ramakrishna is saluting all of them. So that's the idea which we find is expressed through the Sri Ramakrishna's words. Then the master and the devotees enjoyed a supper of delicious dishes which Veni Madhav, their host, had provided. Wednesday, November 15, 1882, Sri Ramakrishna, accompanied by Rakhal and several other devotees, came to Calcutta in a carriage and called for him at the school where he was teaching. Then they all set out for the Maidan. Sri Ramakrishna wanted to see the Wilson Circus. As the carriage rolled along the crowded Chitpur road, his joy was very great. Like a little child, he leaned first out of one side of the carriage and then out of the other, talking to himself as if addressing the passers-by. To M he said, I find the attention of the people fixed on earthly things. They are all rushing about for the sake of their stomachs. No one is thinking of God. So he's looking at the people, and that's as if he's scanning them. What he's saying is very interesting. They're all rushing for the sake of their stomachs. As Sri Ramakrishna in some other context has indicated, Kolite Annogato Pran. That in Kali Yuga, all are there means our vitality is so much dependent on food. Apparently this word in Kali, this our vitality is just dependent on food. It may mean that we don't have that resilience to bear the the hardships. If we don't have food for some time, we immediately start feeling weak. That's the apparent meaning, but actual meaning is really something wonderful, which has something to do with what he's saying here, that that attention of the people is fixed on earthly things. They're all rushing about for the sake of their stomachs. No one is thinking of God. He's actually speaking of a paradox of the entire human civilization. What's the paradox? Just see that the entire human civilization, how it has progressed, how it has evolved. We were food gatherers, and then we learned agriculture. We were food producers. With the progress of civilization, as we proceeded from food gatherers to the food producers, that entailed in some leisure. From the leisure came this time to really think of something higher. If you're always busy with your day-to-day mundane affairs, how to sustain myself, where is time for thinking of something higher? That's why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, "Khali pete dharma hoy na." In empty stomach, you can never think of religion. You have to have your basic sustenance met, the basic needs met for your sustenance. The basic needs for your sustenance, it has to be met. Then only you can think of higher pursuits of life. So, the religion, all these sublime thoughts came once we became the food producers, because with that the leisure came. But just see, the entire civilization, human civilization, what is the only goal? To get more and more leisure. All our achievements, what it speaks of, that how to get more and more leisure. Previously, if I want to send some news to a person has to take the letter, walk by foot, and go to that person like a courier. Now just the mobile phone is in your pocket, with your finger, just you press the buttons and you can send the email, send the message in a moment. In your house, that washing machine, freezer, air conditioner, everything speaks of leisure. More and more time for leisure. But just see, we are constantly trying for more and more leisure. But is there any leisure? Sometimes you will feel in the present age with a mad rush that we even don't have the leisure which other so-called food gatherers had. No, there is no demarcation of work hours and your family hours. After the COVID, it has become still more. The demarcation has gone still more. It has become diluted. You find that constantly we are as if at work. There is no leisure. In our search for leisure, there is no leisure. Why? Because the civilization is such. If I am not working, I do not earn sufficient livelihood for my sustenance. It is no question that, okay, just for my minimum sustenance, I will work less and rest of the time, let me spend in leisure. No. If you have to work just incessantly. Otherwise, you have no work. There is no question of your choice of having restricted hours. You will find that we are as if constantly, incessantly working. There is no leisure. And all our work is just to create some leisure. So what has happened? At last we are finding that we have been bound in such a way that even for getting a little anna, a little food for our sustenance, we have to work incessantly. Such is the situation which Sri Ramakrishna felt even 100 years back. That's what he is saying. I find that they're all rushing about for the sake of their stomachs. Where is the time for thinking? No one is thinking of God. So they don't have that little leisure even to think of God. Constantly they are rushing. That's why he is saying that in this yuga, in this time, everyone's prana is annagata. It is all their endeavor is just to earn their bread and just their livelihood. It's a total time, total energy is gone in that. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. It's indicating the pitiable condition in which we are going through. They arrived at the circus Tickets for the cheapest seats were purchased. The devotees took the master to a high gallery, and they all sat on a bench. He said joyfully, "Ha, this is a good place. I can see the show well from here." There were exhibitions of various feats. A horse raced around a circular track over which large iron rings were hung at intervals. The circus rider, an Englishwoman, stood on one foot on the horse's back, and as the horse passed under the rings, she jumped through them, always alighting on one foot on the horse's back. The horse raced around the entire circle, and the woman never missed the horse or lost her balance. When the circus was over, the master and the devotees stood outside in the field near the carriage. Since it was a cold night, he covered his body with his green shawl. By the way, that green shawl is still there. If you go to the Belur Museum, you can see it there. So he covered his body with this green shawl. Sri Ramakrishna said to him, "Did you see how that Englishwoman stood on one foot on her horse while it ran like lightning? How difficult a feat that must be. She must have practiced a long time. The slightest carelessness, and she would break her arms or legs. She might even be killed. One faces the same difficulty leading the life of a householder. A few succeed in it through the grace of God and as a result of their spiritual practice." So here, it's not that Sri Ramakrishna is discouraging us, the so-called those who are householders. He is just showing that it is difficult, but it is not impossible. As it has been mentioned in Kathopanishad, that there is that famous sloka, Uttishtata, Jagrata, Prapya Varan Nivodhata, Kshurasya Dhara, Nishita, Duratyaya, Durgang Pathastat, Kavayo Vadanti. Suttishthata Jagrata. Arise, awake, Prapya Varan Nivodhata. The thing which has to be attained, Prapya. Attain it by following the path of the great ones, the ones who have already traversed this path and have reached the goal. They are the Varan, they are the great ones. By Nivodhata, by contemplating on the path which they have traversed, you can also reach that goal. For that, arise, awake. Know it for certain, it's not very easy. Kshurasya dhara. It's just like walking on the edge of the razor. Kshura is the razor. So it is less like walking on that edge of the razor. Just a little, you lose your balance, you fall. You have to be so much cautious. That's the path. Kshurasya dhara. Nishita duratyaya. Durgam patastat. That it is very difficult to walk on this. That's what the Kavayo, the Rishis, the Kavis, the Rishis, who have already traversed this path, they say. So same thing Sri Ramakrishna is saying, it is very difficult. But difficult doesn't mean impossible. Just the way climbing the Everest, Mount Everest is difficult, but it is not impossible. There are so many who have climbed. So here also Sri Ramakrishna is warning. It is not that he is discouraging, that he is saying that to attain that spiritual illumination is difficult. But difficulty does not mean impossible. So most people fail. Entering, if you even, that even those who are climbing the Everest, so many fail. It is not that all succeed. But you can succeed if you really try and if there is a grace of God. These two things, if you succeed in it through the grace of God and as a result of spiritual practice. So both are required, grace of God and spiritual practice. Through spiritual practice, if real resignation comes, then grace dawns in. What's the role of spiritual practice? Through spiritual practice, we can never get the divine. Spiritual practice is just to make us aware of the fact that we can never attain the divine through our effort. And then comes the true resignation. That's why in Bhagavad Gita, After, in the 18th chapter, in the last chapter, after speaking of all the other yogas in the previous chapter, Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, everything he has spoken of in the previous chapters. In the last, he is speaking of resignation. He is saying that renounce all the dharma and take refuge in me alone. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Aham tvam sarva papebhya mokshaishyami ma shuchah. So why in the last chapter he is speaking of resignation? Because to say that I have resigned to the divine, it's easy to say, but unless we have really realized that with my effort I cannot attain him, that true resignation never comes. It's a matter of feeling, it's not mere word. And when that feeling comes, then that resignation comes. Is you let go, that what doesn't allow us to fall from a tree? Because we are holding onto the branch. To fall, there is no need for any effort. You leave the hold, the gravity pulls you down. Similarly, the grace of God is always there, is always flowing. It is we who are holding onto the branch of this samsara, of this worldly existence. We never leave it. Through our spiritual practices, when that resignation comes, we leave the hold and totally depend on the divine. The grace works on us and it takes us to that spiritual realization. So, the grace as well as the spiritual practice, both are required. Without purushakara, without spiritual practice, we can never have that pure resignation. And unless that resignation is there, the grace can never work on us. So that's why he's saying, Guru Ramakrishna is saying, a few succeed in it through the grace of God and as a result of spiritual practice. So both are required. There's a Purushakara and Kripa. These two, both are required. With the Purushakara, the real resignation comes. As Sri Ramakrishna tells that story of a bird sitting on the mast of a mast of a ship. The ship is on the deep ocean, and when the bird now tries to fly to the shore, it goes to the east, doesn't find any land, comes back, goes to the west, to the north, to the south, finds no land anywhere, and then with full resignation comes and sits on the mast, just depending on the ship wherever it takes me. So that's the resignation. All our spiritual practices is to make our wings tired, and then the true resignation comes, and then it can take you to that realization. So it's only a few who can go through this process. It's very difficult, but not impossible. It can happen. For our part, we can go on trying. When the grace will dawn, we don't know. But let us do our part. That let us endeavor. As Sri Ramakrishna used to give an allegory of the two farmers. There were two farmers. One never plowed the land. Other plowed the land. And they never knew when the rain will come. And suddenly the rain came. The one who has not plowed the land, he is not going to get any benefit. The one who has plowed the land, he alone is going to get the benefit. When the rain comes, is not in our hand. But the one who has not plowed the land is not going to get the benefit. So, Purushakara and Kripa, let us do whatever we have to do. And when the grace of divine will come, we are not certain about it, but it will come. And when these two synchronizes together, and then that miracle happens, it takes us to that realization. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, that it's not easy. It's very difficult with this little carelessness that we can have a tremendous fall in our spiritual life. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. We should. All these repeated failures ultimately can take us to that ultimate success. These failures are the pillars of success. It's true even in spiritual life. We cannot succeed in one day through incessant effort, through perseverance, through patience. We are going to reach the goal today or tomorrow. That's why in Hindi there is a saying that Guru ke dwar mein kutte ke maafik pare raho. Just lie on the door of your Guru or God, just like a dog. If you feed the dog, then also it is with you. If you don't feed it, it won't leave you. It is going to stay with you. It has an unconditional love for you. So that type of unconditional love and faith has to be there for the divine. One of the presidents of the Ramakrishna order, the second president, Swami Shivananda, a wonderful spiritual person, he had one pet dog. And whenever anyone is to come, they will see that dog is lying at the door of Shivananda's room. And to the devotees, he will point the picture of Sri Ramakrishna on the wall and say that this I am is his dog. And this is, first he will say this is my dog and this is his dog. So the idea is that just resign to the divine, get hold of him, let him do whatever he wants to do with you. Never leave him. Wait. If it's required to wait for eternity, have that patience to wait for eternity. It will happen. It will happen in time. So that's the idea which Sri Ramakrishna is saying, that it's difficult, but don't get disheartened. Have patience, have perseverance. And that's why Swami Vivekananda always used to say, the entire spiritual journey can be described with 3P. 3 P's are purity, patience, perseverance. Purity is our repeated attempt to keep our mind in the thought of God. That speaks of purity. That's not possible in a day. We should have patience. And we should not be sitting idle. Our practice should be incessant. It should go on. That speaks of perseverance. If these 3 we have, then spiritual illumination is bound to happen. And that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. But most people fail entering the world. They become more and more involved into it. They drown in worldliness and suffer the agonies of death. A few only, like Janaka, have succeeded through the power of their austerity in leading the spiritual life as householders. Therefore, spiritual practice is extremely necessary. Otherwise, one cannot rightly live in the world. That's the thing which Sri Ramakrishna was saying. That's a continuation of the same idea which we find in these words. The master got into the carriage with the devotees and went to Balaram's house. He was taken with his companions to the 2nd floor. It was evening and the lamps were lighted. The master described the fits he had seen at the circus. Gradually other devotees gathered and soon he was engaged in spiritual talk with them. The conversation turned into the caste system. Sri Ramakrishna said, the caste system can be removed by one means only, and that is the love of God. Lovers of God do not belong to any caste. The mind, body and soul of a man becomes purified through the divine love. Chaitanya and Nityananda scattered the name of Hari to everyone, including the Pariya, and embraced them all. A Brahmin without this love is no longer a Brahmin, and a Pariya with the love of God is no longer a Pariya. Pariya is an untouchable, as per the caste distinction, the lowest rung of the caste hierarchy. They were untouchables. So he's saying a Pariya with the love of God is no longer a Pariya, and a Brahmin without the love of God is no longer a Brahmin. Through bhakti, an untouchable becomes pure and elevated. Now, what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating is actually speaks of the Indian history of our spiritual journey. The bhakti movement in the medieval ages, that led to the devotional transformation of the medieval Hindu society, where previously the Vedic rituals, in the Vedic path, in the path of monasticism, there was the idea of adhikari, that who is competent to be initiated in the spiritual journey. That a lot of qualifications were mentioned, that those who have those qualifications, they only can proceed. And there was this stratification of the caste system. So the bhakti movement came and broke all that. So that's why we find that as a bhakta, the barricades, all the barriers of caste falls off. If you have devotion, you also can reach that ultimate goal. So that's the idea. We say that we find that the Hindu society, wherein the Vedic rituals or the ascetic monk-like lifestyle for liberation, for moksha. That gave away, when the bhakti movement came, that gave away to the individualistic loving relationship with the divine, for which everyone, whoever has love in his heart, who doesn't have love? That's the qualification. The only qualification required is if you feel a little love for the divine. That's all. Whoever you may be, you are competent to proceed in this path. So this new revolution opened up the channel for spirituality for all. The salvation which was previously considered to be attainable only by men of the higher caste, like the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, three varna, they were only entitled to be initiated in the spiritual journey. The so-called Shudras, the untouchables, they were not even allowed. So the picture of the society ridden with this exclusiveness, we can visualize it even from a verse in the Vivek Chudamani. Shankaracharya in Vivek Chudamani, what is saying? Labdhva kathanchit narajanma durlabham. That how spirituality becomes something exclusive. That you have to have a human birth. Tatrapi pungstvam. Even if you're a human, but if you're a female, then again, spirituality is not for you. You have to be a male. And that also you have to be Shruti Paradarshanam. You have to be versed in the scriptures. Now, for the lower caste, the scriptures were not even available. They couldn't access it. That speaks of only these higher castes. So these higher caste people who have access to the scripture, that too they should be male. And of course they are humans. Then only this exclusiveness speaks of that then only they are entitled for the spiritual journey. Yastatma mukto na yateta mudavi. Yahi atmaha swang vinihanti asadgrahat. So what it speaks of? This speaks of exclusiveness. It's not that Shankaracharya is ascribing to that. He is just giving the picture of the then society. From that you get the picture of the then society. That the society was so much crystallized into this caste, into this gender, that there was no access for the spiritual path, those who didn't fall within that criteria. The bhakti movement came and opened that all. That as we saw that Chaitanya and Nityananda, they went down the roads calling everyone to join in that Sankirtan. That how that movement became so powerful, because it was open to all. There's all the caste barriers has fallen off. All were invited to enjoy the bliss of the divine by singing of the God, of the divine. We find in all the bhakti movement illuminaries who was following the same thing. If you read the life of Ramanujacharya, his guru gave him the mantra and told, never divulge it to anyone. And then Ramanujacharya asked, well, what will happen if I divulge the mantra to anyone? This guru warned him and told that if you divulge the mantra to anyone, that person will be liberated at the cost of your liberation. You will go to hell. So don't divulge it. Immediately Ramanuja went to the top of this is the Gopuram, the temple. And from there he shouted, called everyone, come everyone. So all the people were curious, so that why he's asking everyone to come near him. So all gathered, a huge crowd gathered. And the mantra which his guru gave him, he shouted at the top of his voice and told everyone, chant this mantra. Om Namo Narayanaya. His guru was furious. He told, in spite of that warning, why you transgressed? Ramanuja told, you told me that whoever hears it, he will attain salvation at the cost of my salvation. I will go to hell. I am ready to go to hell if so many people go to reach that spiritual illumination, salvation. His guru was really amazed to see that wonderful heart of Ramanujacharya. This bhakti movement speaks of that heart. It opened up. And that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, that bhakter kono jat nahi, that once you are a devotee, for him there is no caste. All the caste distinctions falls off. He has said in one place very nicely that the rivers do have demarcation. When the rivers do have demarcation, there are the shores. But when the flood comes, all the demarcation vanishes. All the various rivers will be united by the over-flooding water. So he used to say that bhakti is like that. It floods all the demarcation, all the various rivers with a distinct path, all are gone. It becomes flooded, all the demarcations are gone, and all become united in that same love of the God, of the divine. So it is just like flood. This bhakti is like a flood. It helps us to seize all demarcation. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, that there's only one way we can override the caste system. And that's what, by means of bhakti. Lovers of God do not belong to any caste. Bhaktir kono jat nahi. The mind, body and the soul of a man become purified through divine love. So this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda asserted that. Just take the name of the Lord and you are purified. God is powerful. His name is powerful. The moment you take, you are purified. The one who has faith in God's name is purified immediately. Otherwise, for what God is there if he doesn't have the power to purify me just by taking his name? So that's the tremendous faith which Chaitanya, Nityananda and all the bhakti movement leaders established in the heart of the people. And that's how the devotion became something, an overwhelming factor which unified the entire the strata of the so-called Hindu race. And that's the thing which Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, that for a bhakta there is no distinction. The Brahmin, and a Brahmin without this is not a Brahmin, and a pariya with the love of God is no longer a pariya. Through bhakti, an untouchable becomes pure and elevated. Speaking of householders entangled in worldliness, the Master said, they are like the silkworm. They can come out of the cocoon of their worldly life if they wish, but they can't bear to, for they themselves have built the cocoon with great love and care. So they die there, or they are like the fish in a trap. They can come out of it by the way they have entered. So what is the way they have entered? Obsession. Obsession for the worldly things. That same obsession is the way by which they have entered. The same obsession, when they can give it to the God, the same love for the worldly things. It is a love, inordinate attachment to the things which have made them trapped in this worldly existence. It's the same love, but different. The object of love is different. If it is to the God, so the love is the same way through which we spirally came downwards. The love is the same way which we can come out. So that's what he's saying. They can come out by the way they have entered, by following that love. By instead of worldly things, it has to be directed towards the God. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Bhagavane ashukti ashuktir moddhe noy. Attachment to God is not to be considered as an attachment. Just as hinche shak shaker moddhe noy. A particular type of green is not to be considered as green. Hinche shak. What is that green? That generally when you are indisposed, you are having some stomach issues, digestion issues, you are not supposed to take green then, because it may exaggerate but there are certain greens which actually helps in the digestion. That's the hinche shak. Michri mishtir moddhe noy. That sugar candy, anything sweet increases acidity. But in the Ayurvedic treatment, the sugar candy, the juice of the sugar candy is used to treat the acidity. It is like something like antacid. So the sugar candies is not to be considered as sweet. Similarly, attachment to the God is not to be considered as attachment. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying in some other context. So obsession is the way which has forced us to be bound in this worldly way of existence. The same obsession, when it is directed towards God, it can take us out. So, but they sport inside what we have done, we never follow that way. But most of the jivas, they sport inside the trap with other fish and hear the sweet sound of the murmuring water and forget everything else. They don't even make an effort to free themselves from the trap. The lisping of children is the murmur of the water, and the other fish are relatives and friends. Only one or two make good their escape by running away. they are the liberated souls. So that's the idea, that our necessity has become our obsession, but however this obsession, which takes us spirally downwards, can take us spirally upwards if it is turned towards God. And then all other obsessions breaks off, taking us to that spiritual revelation. So after speaking these words, Ramakrishna will sing a song. Next he sings a song highlighting this idea. So that song and a bit more elaboration on these last words, that we are trapped, we can go out, but still we never try to come out of the way by which we have came in. So this is the idea with which we will start our discussion again in the next class. So with this, we start our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskars.